You'll always be my errand boy, my brother laughed. So I let him rely on me completely until I invoiced him for every favor. I'm Alex, 32 years old, male. My older brother Mark, 35, has been my shadow and my tyrant since we were kids. People think older brothers are supposed to protect you, maybe even guide you. Mark did the opposite. He weaponized being older into a full-time ego trip. The memory that sticks with me most? I was 12, he was 15, and he made me run to the gas station in the rain because he needed Skittles before his Xbox match. I came home soaked, clutching the bag, and he tossed me one piece, just one, and laughed, "Good errand boy." It stuck. That phrase has haunted me for 2 decades. It didn't stop when we grew up. If anything, it got worse because Mark never really launched. He bounced between jobs: bartender, gym desk clerk, briefly sold supplements out of the trunk of his car, while I worked my ass off building a stable career as a project manager. Guess who still ended up driving him to interviews, helping him fix his resume, even spotting him rent money, just this once? Yeah, me, the errand boy. But the cruelest part was the way he framed it. Every time he called me up, "Hey, can you swing by and grab me? Can you help me move? Can you watch my dog for a month while I go to Miami with some girl I just met?" He'd couch it like he was doing me a favor. Come on, Alex, you don't want to be boring. Live a little. You love helping me. And I went along with it because that's what younger brothers are trained to do. I'd tell myself it wasn't a big deal. I'd tell myself family helps family. But every little favor chipped away at me until resentment sat heavy in my chest, like wet cement that never quite dried. The turning point came last year. We were at a cookout at my parents' place. Me, Mark, our parents, a couple cousins. Mark had just roped me into helping him replace his alternator that morning, 3 hours under a car in 90-degree heat. I was filthy, starving, and still smelling like oil when he clinked his beer against mine and in front of everyone said, "You'll always be my errand boy, huh?" Laughter. My mom half-heartedly scolded him. Dad just shrugged like boys will be boys. But it wasn't funny. Something about the smug look on Mark's face, like he'd branded me permanently, snapped something inside me. I smiled, nodded, played along in the moment. But deep down, I was boiling. I realized he would never stop unless I made him, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't interested in just swallowing it. That night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan humming, an idea started forming. I wasn't going to fight him. I wasn't going to scream or throw punches. No, I was going to let him bury himself under the weight of his own laziness. And when the time was right, I'd hand him the bill. Once that seed took root, I couldn't stop watering it. I started keeping track of everything Mark asked me to do. Every ride, every errand, every hour spent fixing his screw-ups. Not in a petty, I'll get him back way at first, more like documentation. Proof, maybe for myself, that I wasn't crazy. That this was a pattern, not brotherly love. Over the next couple months, the list grew faster than I expected. Pick him up when his car broke down. Again? Watch his dog when he wanted a last-minute Vegas trip with some girl from Tinder. Drive across town to return a borrowed power drill that was actually mine. At first, I just wrote it down with a little smirk, like, God, he's predictable. But soon I realized the list looked like an actual invoice. I'm talking columns: date, task, hours, mileage. I even added a rate, $25 an hour. Nothing crazy, just what I thought was fair for my time. Seeing it add up in black and white was honestly sickening. In 3 months alone, Mark had racked up $3,400 worth of favors. Meanwhile, my parents, Thomas, 62, and Ellen, 60, kept pretending this was normal. My mom excused it as, "That's just how your brother is." My dad would shrug and mutter, "You're better at handling things than he is, Alex, don't make it a big deal." As if competence was a punishment I had to serve. What they didn't see, what I did, was how Mark had weaponized helplessness. He'd learned that if he cried broke, looked pitiful, or leaned on family, someone would step in. And I was his favorite crutch, but documenting it gave me a strange kind of power. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was building a case. The first test came one Friday night. Mark called me, slurring his words, asking if I could pick him up from some bar across town because his ride bailed. Normally, I'd groan and grab my keys. This time, I paused. What's in it for me? I asked, half joking. He laughed like I'd told the dumbest joke on earth. What do you mean? You're my brother. Errand boy duties, right? That phrase again. I could almost hear the beer in his laugh. My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice light. Fine, I'll add it to your tab. He didn't even process it, just laughed harder and told me to hurry up. But as I drove him home that night, watching him snore in the passenger seat, head lolling against the window, I realized something. He had no idea I was dead serious. I was his driver, his mover, his dog sitter. But underneath that, I was quietly turning myself into his bill collector. And sooner or later, he was going to find out just how expensive I really was. Don't forget to subscribe. The crazy part is, once I committed to this tab, it felt like Mark leaned on me even harder, almost like he could sense I was pulling away and wanted to test my limits. One weekend, he called me 3 separate times. Once to haul his old couch down 2 flights of stairs because he found a way nicer one on Facebook Marketplace. Once to wait at his apartment for the internet guy because he had plans. And once to pick up his dog from the groomer because he lost track of time. Each time I smiled, did it, and logged the hours. The list was getting ridiculous. By now, I had a spreadsheet so polished it looked like something I'd present at work. Rows, formulas, even mileage calculated with IRS rates. Watching the total climb gave me a dark kind of satisfaction. But of course, no one else saw it that way. When I vented to my parents, they just doubled down. Alex, don't be so dramatic, my mom, Ellen, said when I mentioned Mark's new couch move. You're younger, stronger, it's good exercise. Yeah, son, my dad, Thomas, added. Your brother's had a rough run lately. You're the stable one. It's not forever. I wanted to scream. It had always been forever. Mark's rough run had lasted his entire adult life, but to them, me setting boundaries would have looked like cruelty. So instead, I leaned in. I became the best damn errand boy alive. I never complained. I said, sure thing, bro, every time. And I wrote it all down. The moment that locked everything in happened at a family barbecue a month later. Mark strutted over, beer in hand, slapped me on the back hard enough to spill my plate, and said loud enough for the cousins to hear. This guy, my errand boy for life. Don't know what I'd do without him. Laughter. My dad shook his head like boys will be boys. My mom sighed and told me not to take it seriously. But the heat in my chest wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was something sharper. Because while they were laughing, I was doing math in my head. My brother's joke now had a price tag that could pay off half my car loan. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, raised my soda can, and thought, keep laughing, Mark. Every favor is another nail in your coffin. And that's when I decided exactly how he was going to pay. Not with money alone. No. I wanted him humiliated, cornered, forced to confront just how pathetic his errand boy really made him look. I didn't know how yet, but I knew the reveal had to be public. Somewhere he couldn't wriggle out with charm or excuses, and I wouldn't have to wait long, because Mark, being Mark, was about to hand me the perfect stage. Mark's perfect stage arrived in the form of his birthday. He turned 35 that summer, and of course he wanted to make it a spectacle. Not at a bar, not a chill night with friends. No, he wanted a backyard bash at our parents' place with family, neighbors, old buddies from high school, even his latest fling, some 20-something named Tara, who giggled at everything he said. He called me a week before the party. Hey, errand boy, need a huge favor, he said, like always. Can you pick up the keg, handle the grill, maybe string some lights around mom and dad's yard? You know, set the vibe? I almost laughed right there. The man wanted me to plan his birthday party under the disguise of helping. And that's when the plan crystallized. This was it, the reveal. Sure, bro, I said, chipper as hell. I'll take care of everything. And I did. I bought the decorations, got the grill cleaned, even mowed the lawn so the yard would look spotless. I wanted no distractions when the moment came. Every time I swiped my card or lifted something heavy, I felt a grin tugging at me because each action was getting logged. Every second was going on the bill. The day of the party, Mark was in rare form, holding court like a washed-up celebrity, telling loud stories about crazy nights and making digs at me whenever he could. Alex is a lifesaver, he announced to a circle of old classmates. Guy's basically my unpaid assistant. He loves it. Don't you, errand boy? The words landed harder than he realized. A couple people laughed awkwardly, but I caught a flash of discomfort on Tara's face. It wasn't cute anymore, it was cringe, and that was my opening. After everyone ate and the sun dipped low, Mark's friend handed him a gift bag. He tore into it dramatically. New sneakers. He strutted around like he'd won a trophy. Then he grinned at me. Yo, Alex, you get me something? Or was planning my party the gift? Perfect. I stood, pulled a thick envelope from under my chair, and handed it to him. Actually, yeah, I did. He ripped it open, expecting cash or a gift card. Instead, out slid a stapled packet, my itemized invoice. Pages of every ride, every errand, every hour logged. Total at the bottom, 8,475. The laughter died instantly. Mark blinked, confused, then read aloud. Pickup from bar, June 4th, 2 hours, $50. Couch move, July 11th, $75. Dog sitting, 1 week, $600. Birthday setup, $300. People started leaning in. His friends were whispering. Tara's eyebrows shot up. I stayed calm, sipping my soda. You always said I was your errand boy. Well, here's the bill. You can settle up whenever. The silence cracked when my dad barked, Alex, that's enough. Don't ruin your brother's birthday with this nonsense. But it was too late. The damage was done. Everyone had seen it. The mighty Mark, exposed as a leech who lived off his little brother. His face turned red, then purple. He slammed the packet down, beer sloshing over the table. This is a joke, right? You're not serious. Oh, I'm serious, I said, locking eyes with him. Dead serious. And for the first time in our lives, Mark didn't have a comeback. He just sat there, humiliated, while the party buzzed with whispers. That was the moment I knew. My revenge had officially begun. Don't forget to subscribe. Update 1. Hey Reddit, I didn't think I'd be back so soon, but holy hell, y'all blew up my inbox. I posted about finally invoicing my older brother Mark for every favor he ever dumped on me, and let's just say the reaction at his birthday party was only the beginning. First off, some of you had me laughing harder than I have in weeks. One comment said, bro didn't just serve him an invoice, he served a subpoena for his soul. Another person suggested I should have charged emotional labor interest, which honestly, you're not wrong. A few of you even offered to help me design a better invoice template with late fees and payment plans. Respect. But not everyone was kind. I got a DM saying I was cruel for embarrassing family in public, and another person told me I should have just talked it out instead of stooping to his level. To those people, you don't understand. Talking to Mark never worked. If I said no, he'd guilt-trip me. If I got upset, he'd laugh harder. He thrived on making me feel small. The invoice wasn't petty, it was proof. And let me tell you, Mark did not take it well after the party ended. He cornered me in the driveway, still red-faced, hissing like a kettle ready to blow. You humiliated me, Alex, in front of Tara, in front of everyone. You think this is funny? I just held up my hands and said, settle the bill, and I'll call it even. That's when he completely lost it. He grabbed the packet, ripped it in half, and threw the pieces on the ground. Then he stomped off, yelling about how I'd always been jealous of him. Jealous of him, the guy who can't even keep a job for 6 months. Later that night, I got a string of texts from our mom, Ellen, telling me I owed Mark an apology for making a scene. My dad, Thomas, just sent me a one-liner. You pushed too far. Not a word about how Mark has leaned on me his whole life. Not a word about his treatment of me. Just disappointment directed at me. But here's the kicker. A couple of Mark's friends, guys who used to pile on and call me errand boy too, texted me privately after. They said seeing it all written out actually opened their eyes. One even joked, damn, I owe you for gas money too. So yeah, the invoice stunt worked better than I ever imagined. Mark's pride took a direct hit, and people saw him for what he really is. But now I can feel the storm coming. Because if there's one thing I know about Mark, it's that he doesn't stay humiliated quietly. And judging by Tara's cold shoulder at the end of the night, he might already be plotting something messy. After the party, Mark went radio silent for about 3 days, which, for him, was suspicious. Normally, he'd be blowing up my phone with favors like nothing happened. This silence felt loaded, like the pause before a storm. On day 4, the storm hit. I came home from work to find my porch covered in trash bags, my own stuff. boxes of tools, a duffel bag of clothes, even my old guitar, all dumped like garbage. My stomach dropped because I knew exactly what happened. I'd left a few things at my parents' house over the years, and apparently Mark had taken it upon himself to return them in the most dramatic way possible. Sure enough, taped to one of the boxes was a note in his handwriting. "Here's your bill. Don't come crawling to us again." He actually had the audacity to act like I was the leech. I carried everything inside, shaking with rage. My neighbors, a sweet older couple, had been sitting on their porch across the street. The wife called out, "Everything okay, Alex?" I just smiled tight and said, "Family stuff." But my hands were trembling the whole time. Then the texts started. Dozens of them. "Mark, you made me look pathetic. Tara dumped me." Mark, "Mom says you're tearing this family apart." Mark, "If you want war, you've got it." The escalation was textbook Mark. When cornered, he didn't apologize, he detonated. And he didn't stop at trash bags. The next week, I came out to my car one morning to find the words "errand boy" scrawled in soap across my windshield. It washed off, but the message was clear. I didn't tell my parents right away because I already knew the script. Ellen would sigh and say, "Don't provoke him, Alex." Thomas would grumble about letting things go. And Mark, he'd smirk, knowing they'd always shield him. But here's the thing. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Because unlike him, I planned ahead. Remember that invoice? I had digital copies. Every version, every log entry, backed up in the cloud. He could rip up paper all day long, but the record was permanent. And then it hit me. The perfect next step. The reveal at his birthday had cracked the mask in front of friends. But what about the people Mark cared most about impressing? His bosses, his co-workers, the small circle of people who still believed his charming screw-up act. He'd just started bragging about a new job at some local gym, front desk manager. Nothing glamorous, but for Mark, it was a big step. He'd been telling everyone how responsible he was now. What if his shiny new boss got an anonymous envelope? What if they opened it and found a neatly formatted invoice exposing exactly how their reliable employee treated his own brother? The thought made me grin in a way that almost scared me. Because for once, Mark wouldn't just be humiliated at home. He'd be stripped bare where it really hurt. At work, in front of strangers who wouldn't excuse him as family. And I already knew the perfect time to strike. I waited 2 weeks. Long enough for Mark to think maybe the dust had settled, that maybe I'd gone back to swallowing everything like I always did. Meanwhile, I was refining the invoice into something sharper, less brotherly joke, more formal documentation. I added professional formatting, clean columns, even a company-style header. A. Carter Services. Underneath, my tagline, reliability, since childhood. Petty? Maybe, but oh, it looked damn official. Then, one Monday morning before work, I slid an anonymous manila envelope into the outgoing mail, addressed neatly to the gym manager where Mark worked. Inside, the full invoice packet, plus a cover sheet labeled Character Reference, Mark Carter. I expected it to land like a grenade, but I underestimated just how unstable Mark already was. By Thursday, I got a call from my mom, Ellen, her voice tight. "Alex, what did you do?" Apparently, Mark had gone nuclear at the gym. His manager pulled him into the office with the packet laid out on the desk, asked if he wanted to explain. Mark denied everything, then snapped, screaming about backstabbing family and fake invoices. He knocked a stack of flyers off the counter in front of customers, stormed out, and quit on the spot. When Ellen finished scolding me, I asked one question. Did I write a single lie? She didn't answer. She just sighed and said, "You need to fix things with your brother." Which, in parent speak, meant take the blame so Mark doesn't have to. But Mark wasn't interested in fixing. That night, my phone lit up with messages that felt more unhinged than usual. "You think you're smarter than me? You ruined my job. I'll ruin you. Don't sleep too deep, errand boy." That last one made my stomach twist. I knew Mark was unstable, but this was different. Spiteful in a way that felt dangerous. And sure enough, the next escalation wasn't just words. Saturday morning, I woke to a loud crack outside my apartment. I bolted to the window and saw it. My car, driver's side mirror dangling by a thread, glass shattered on the pavement. I knew immediately. No random vandal, no coincidence. Mark. I stood barefoot on the cold floor, staring at the wreck, and my heart pounded with two competing thoughts. One, raw and furious. He wants war. He just signed up for it. The other, quieter but sharper. Now I've got him. Real, undeniable damage. Evidence. Because if Mark thought I'd just roll over like always, he was about to learn I'd been keeping receipts longer than he ever imagined. Update 2. All right. Reddit, back with an update. I honestly didn't expect to be writing this soon. My last post ended with me mailing Mark's invoice to his new boss, which tanked his job faster than a wet paper bag. Thought maybe that would cool him down. Spoiler, it didn't. First, some of y'all had me doubled over. One comment said, "Bro turned his trauma into QuickBooks." Another suggested I should send Mark a collections agency notice next, which, don't tempt me. I've already had fun mocking up one. But a lot of you also hit me with real talk. Stuff like, "This isn't just sibling rivalry, this is abuse," and "You're not petty, you're setting boundaries with a grown man-child." Reading that hit me harder than I expected. I've spent so long thinking I was just overreacting that maybe I was the dramatic one. Seeing hundreds of strangers say, "No, dude, he's been using you your whole life," it shook something loose in me. Now for the fallout. Mark found out about the envelope at work. He didn't just sulk, he detonated. He screamed at customers, trashed some flyers, and stormed out. Mom, Ellen, called me sobbing, saying I ruined my brother's chance at turning his life around. Dad, Thomas, barely spoke, just muttered something about kicking a man when he's down. Meanwhile, Mark blew up my phone with threats. One of them literally read, "Don't sleep too deep, errand boy." Yeah, that one sat in my gut like ice. And then this weekend, I woke up to my car mirror shattered clean off. Glass everywhere. No note, no witnesses, but come on, who else? I took photos, filed a police report. I'm done playing passive little brother. Here's the thing. A few of you suggested I stop at humiliation, call it a win. But I can't shake the image of my busted mirror, the texts, the smirk on his face at every family gathering where he called me his errand boy. He's not sorry. He's escalating. So now I'm sitting here with a folder full of receipts, literal evidence of vandalism, and a choice. Do I press charges, scorch the earth, and finally make Mark face consequences he can't charm his way out of? Or do I bide my time, let him dig his own grave deeper, and pull the trigger later? I'll be honest, I'm leaning toward fire. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not scared of my brother. He's scared of me. When the mirror was first smashed, anger was a hot, immediate thing. A flare you could see and swat at. By the time the tire went flat, the anger had cooled into something darker and steadier. Planning. I wanted him stopped, not just shamed. I wanted a line drawn where he couldn't cross without consequence. Mark didn't wait around to escalate slowly. He sped straight for the cliff. That Thursday night, I woke to my phone buzzing with a dozen missed calls from unknown numbers. The first texts were typical bluster, but then one came through that made my stomach drop. A photo of my front window taken from the street, time-stamped 2 hours earlier. Someone had thrown a rock through the glass. The note attached read, "I warned you." I went to my parents the next day because for a second part of me thought this would end if someone older told him to stop. Big mistake. They'd already had their fill of drama. Ellen's face was tight as paper when I explained. Thomas shrugged and said, "Kids push boundaries." When I said he's not a kid, Ellen changed the subject to what to bring for Sunday dinner. Their denial was a second type of violence, the one that pretends everything's fine so the bully can keep going. Mark started involving people I'd never expected. A couple of his buddies, the same ones who laughed at the invoice at the party, stopped being coy. They started showing up near my job site, just to watch, one of them said. Another left a voicemail that sounded like a threat wrapped in a dare. "We've got plans for your car, man. Hope you like walking." I called the police again, adding these voices to the report. Detective Morales was clinical, patient. "We'll log it," she said, "and keep an eye on the neighborhood cams." Her voice was the first thing that felt like an ally instead of a courtroom prophecy. He tried to bait me into a fight. He loitered at my parents' yard when I pulled up after work, sipping a beer like he owned the air. He called me errand boy loud enough for the neighbors to hear. When I stepped out, not to be macho but to document, his friend shoved me in the chest. A scuffle, a neighbor's porch light flicking on, the world narrowing to a sound like a snapped bone. It was terrifying, immediate, stupid. I didn't throw a punch. I turned my phone on and recorded. The push, the shove, his face up close. Sweat, rage, the little vein at his temple pulsing like a metronome. That video became the fulcrum. I handed it to Detective Morales. I handed copies to our landlord when the vandalism started creeping from car to stoop to mailbox. I handed one to my boss when a guy wearing a Mark t-shirt started coming to my site on coffee runs. I made calls instead of threats. I filed for a temporary restraining order and sat through the court hearing with my fingers white-knuckled on the paperwork. Emotion kept exploding in my chest. Fear, shame, and a fierce, cold relief. For the first time, legal language leveled the field. Mark didn't go quietly into the enforcement of the law. He became theatrically unhinged. He trashed a neighbor's lawn gnome, screamed in the grocery store aisle, and when Tara, the girl from his birthday crowd, texted him that people were talking about his meltdown, he drove to her apartment and banged on her door at midnight. She recorded it and sent the clip to me the next morning with one message. He's snapping. I watched the tape in my truck and felt the last, small part of whatever pity I'd had for him crack. There's a sick poetry to how it unfolded. The man who'd built a career out of leaning on people because he could charm them into help found that charm evaporating under lights that showed his behavior in hard definition. Video, police reports, witness statements. He called me names in public until the words bounced off the armor of evidence I'd assembled. But evidence doesn't erase the echo of a smashed mirror. It doesn't make your heart stop jolting every time a car door slams. It also doesn't fix my parents' reflex to protect him. The restraining order bought me distance and a legal leash, but it also pressed a button in him that set him even more off. Public meltdowns, desperate attempts to get people to take his side, frantic posts on his social feeds painting himself as the victim of a collecting brother gone rogue. By the time the court date for the assault charge rolled around, the shove at my parents, Mark had burned most of his bridges. A gym that once hummed with him as background lore now listed him as left voluntarily, with staff who didn't want the trouble. Tara quietly stopped replying to his texts. His buddies gave interviews to the detective that were awkward, apologetic, or simply silent. I'll admit, watching him shrink under the weight of his choices felt like redemption. I also felt a clean kind of sorrow for him. The way you feel watching a house you used to know go up in flames because someone left the gas on. He'd kept one foot in chaos his whole life, and when the microphone of accountability finally hit him, the world didn't clap for him. It turned away. There were nights I wanted to walk to his apartment and throw the invoice back at his feet, crumpled and useless. But the difference now is that I don't do things to hurt for sport. I did this so my life wouldn't be a supply closet for his problems anymore. The law gave me a middle ground where cruelty had consequences, and humiliation had a cost he could no longer dodge. Still, the war wasn't over. Mark had one last card he loved to play, dragging other people into his chaos. He would try to weaponize my guilt, our parents' shame, even a cousin's loyalty. I knew the final act had to both protect what remained of my life and make sure he couldn't rebuild the same racket. I wasn't sure yet what form that would take, but I knew the broken pieces of the mirror were the map, and I was ready to trace them to the end. The court date was the closest thing I've ever felt to stepping into an arena. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I knew Mark would come swinging, metaphorically, if not physically. The shove at my parents' house, the vandalism, the texts, it had all piled into one clear question. Would he finally be held accountable, or would he slip through like always? When they called his name, Mark walked in wearing a wrinkled button-down and a smirk that cracked halfway across his face. He scanned the room, locked eyes with me, and mouthed, "Errand boy." Even there in front of a judge, he couldn't help himself. Detective Morales had everything lined up. My video of the shove, neighbor statements, Tara's late-night recording of him pounding on her door, photos of the broken mirror and shattered window. Watching it play out was surreal, like someone had made a documentary of my life and was screening it for strangers. Mark's defense? That I'd fabricated the entire invoice as part of a campaign to destroy him. He tried to spin it as sibling rivalry, said I was obsessed with making him look bad, that I'd manipulated everyone against him. At one point, he pounded the table so hard the bailiff shifted forward. The judge wasn't buying it. He ordered anger management, restitution for the damage, and upheld the restraining order. Not prison, but for Mark it was worse, because it meant months of mandatory accountability. No charming his way out, no shrugging it off as just how he is. The fallout rippled fast. Tara cut him off completely, moving out of state. His old buddies stopped answering his calls after being dragged into statements. Even Ellen and Thomas finally cracked. When Mom muttered that maybe I took things too far, Dad cut her off. No, he did this. Mark did this to himself. It was the first time I'd ever heard my father put the blame where it belonged. The poetic moment came 2 weeks later. I was at the grocery store when I heard someone call my name. It was one of Mark's old friends, the guy who once laughed hardest when he called me errand boy at parties. He clapped me on the shoulder and said quietly, "You were right, he used you. We all did in a way. Guess we were the errand boys too." I can't explain the way that hit me. Not triumphant, not smug, just final, like the phrase had been exorcised. As for Mark, last I heard, he's bouncing between couches, cycling through part-time jobs until the restraining order lifts. He still posts online about being a victim, about fake family, but fewer people listen now. His stage is smaller, his audience is thinner. And me? I'm done being an errand boy. My car's repaired, my locks are changed, my shoulders feel lighter. I even framed the original invoice, water stains from the beer, Mark's angry scrawl tearing through the paper, and hung it above my desk. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Because that invoice wasn't revenge, not really. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't weak, that years of being treated like a joke could be tallied, charged, and finally, paid in full. And if Mark ever laughs again, if he ever dares call me errand boy in front of anyone, I'll just point to that frame and say, already settled the account. This time, the joke's on him.